as a teacher myself, the question of what is a good teacher, what is good teaching, and who is my teacher? All of these truly have plagued me for my past, 15 years or so of being in this profession in one way or another. And I'd like to talk about an idea that is from Hinduism and Buddhism. Originally Hinduism, of the Lokapala, the heavenly guardians of the Dharma, or also called the Tianwang in Chinese, the bright heavenly kings. So, in the Hindu and Buddhist world, there is this idea of Dharma, your duty, your destiny, your path to fulfilling your purpose within time and space that you have in this life that required you to be in this specific life and circumstance that you're in. The Dharma, or the also sort of ubiquitously referred to as like the virtuous path, the correct path for living a life, is something that is quite elusive and subtle. And with very little exception, even in the Puranas, the tales, it is not quite known to a person what their Dharma is, with the exception of sort of their general stance in society or in their circumstance. For example, I am a son of someone else, so there is a Dharma I have to be a dutiful son. However, my personal life as an individual will remain opaque to me, and even if I feel I know it, do I truly know it is always going to be a question. And so it is very tricky. Why am I here? Why am I here is a question that I think sparks a lot of religious fervor in people. And also just the question of meaning. Is there meaning? Is there not meaning to a life? I, of course, would argue, yes, that there is meaning to life. But of course, I'll never tell you to believe anything. However, it is through the different teachers in our life, and I don't just mean a school teacher, but everyone you've interacted with, that allows you to slowly discover what you think that purpose might be. And this idea of the Tianwang, or the Lokapala, the world guardians, of which there are 4 in Hinduism and in Buddhism. Rather, when it gets to the Buddhist world, which comes from the Hindu world, the names of those beings sort of change. But I decided to do my own little take on the Lokapala, and of course more in the classical Chinese sense, because it's sort of my background of study. And I have certainly spent a lot of time looking into these 4 entities who, there's 4 because there's one for each cardinal direction, north, south, east, and west. And they are the protectors of the righteous way. However, the way they do so can be different. Just as the way any teacher teaches you might be different not only in their style, but in their bearing. So it could be that you have a teacher who was a very difficult person you saw on public transit that ended up teaching you a life lesson without you realizing it, perhaps without them intentionally trying to. Or it could have been a very encouraging word from someone around you, someone in your life, that led you to pursue something more efficaciously, pursue something with more motivation, something that you feel has enriched your life. And both aforementioned teachers, I would argue, are teachers. In fact, I'd say everyone is your teacher. However, there is teaching through peaceful means and teaching through wrath in the Hindu and Buddhist world. And in both cases, I would say it is from a place of love. And I certainly, in my own teaching practice, will treat each student differently in that I try and cater to the need of a person on an individual level and not just a prescribed catch-all way to interact with everyone, because you are teaching people, not a room that might happen to have some people in it. And there is no teacher without students. So sometimes I think everyone can think of either this at this very instance or possibly something similar. Let's say you have a parent or guardian who reprimands you for doing something that you were not supposed to do when you were younger. That could be very scary in the moment. However, it is teaching you something. And over time, you might come to realize whether that thing was right or wrong, and maybe later on you would agree that you did the wrong thing. But in the moment, it certainly might have felt very scary. In an ideal world, that parent or guardian was simply putting on a scary mask so that you would go to the place that you were supposed to go. I can certainly remember an instance when I was living in China, and at this point I had a break from my studies. I was traveling around in Sichuan, this very southern part of Yunnan province. And I went to a temple where there must have been some sort of ritual performance during the day, but it was nighttime. And there was a wooden skid where it must have acted as like a stage earlier in that day, but it had rained and it was quite slippery. And I saw these two children, maybe 3 or 4 years old, climbing onto this wooden stage, and they were having a great time. And they seemed to be unattended, at least looking around. And then I suddenly heard this piercing scream from behind me. It surprised me, it certainly surprised these two little children. And I turned around, it was this old man. And the old man was screaming at these kids to get off of the skid. And they began to cry. They, of course, got off that skid. And then as soon as they got off, they were approached by this old man who was very obviously to me their grandfather. And he was suddenly very, very soft and kind, saying, "Are you okay? Is everything all right? Are you hurt?" And the children slowly stopped crying. Now, to me, upon seeing that situation, I assume that it was simply the most efficacious way, the most expedient way to get these two children to a safer situation, because they might have slipped on the skid because it was slippery wood. And to the children in the moment, they might have thought, "Oh, Grandpa's yelling at me. I'm scared. I don't know what to do. I'll just follow that order." And that's what they did. Perhaps now, many years later, they would agree that in this situation, their grandfather was looking out for them. However, in the moment, it looked like wrath. And it was certainly from a place of very deep love and care that this grandfather did this. And so too with peace. Sometimes it is not required to scare someone into submission to a ruling or a way to act or safety. Sometimes someone just understands when you tell them, and they might agree right away. So what I have done in this piece, this is one of many, and I imagine there will be more. I have thought about a type of religious practice, a sort of indigenous religious practice in the Dali region in Yunnan, the place I lived the longest in China, called Jiama. So Jiama is inherently in the meaning of these two characters. We don't really have what the practice entails, but it is a type of woodblock carving and printing where a person creates a god, essentially. They create some sort of entity for something they hope to strive for or be blessed with, and then they make a print of it and they burn it ritualistically, and then it is believed that that sort of entity that they have created will bless them, which is fascinating from a religious perspective. But what I've decided to do is to make my own animal-headed versions of the Tianwang, all of a different sort of emanation. There are some that I've made that I've already given away, and some that are for sale on my Etsy store, which you can look at in the link in this video. But then this one is quite new. This one is a peaceful Tianwang. You could see the bottom two characters in the Chinese Tianwang are the heavenly king. And the characters that come before it are what I have given these entities power over, you could say. However, this is, of course, just a carving that I made. It's just a creative pursuit. So this one is a deer-headed sage holding a serpentine spear, maybe a fishing spear, maybe just ornamental, standing sort of resplendently armored on a cloud. And this sort of idea of one foot in the air is a Hindu idea, I believe stemming from depictions of Ganesha, who has one foot in the air, sort of emblematic of having one foot in the material world, one foot in the metaphysical world, the immaterial, the esoteric. And I've decided to carve in the xiaozhuan, the sort of seal script style Chinese that I love to carve in, 慈悲天王. So 慈悲 is compassion. And so this is the heavenly king of compassion that I've carved as a stag, shining with a sunny halo behind it. And it will be for sale on my Etsy store. So if you've enjoyed this, I'm very grateful that you've lasted this far in the video. And also, I implore you, I recommend that we think to our teachers in our lives, and perhaps even the people who unintentionally are our teachers in our lives, and treat them as such. That everyone certainly is your teacher. Whether it be someone who very clearly loves you, cares for you, teaching you about care in the world, or whether it be someone who is difficult, someone who tests your patience. They are teaching you patience. And if you let everyone be your teacher, I guarantee you will have a more fun time walking through this world than otherwise. And I would say you might even learn a bit more. Have a wonderful day.